Hello and welcome back to the competitive biography of Emanuel Lasker. Today we'll be taking a look at Game 6 in Lasker's match against Jacques Mieses. It seems that Lasker is very close to putting the match away altogether, as he's only 2 wins away from winning it outright, but as we saw in game number 4, Mieses can be a very dangerous player when he gets a good attack, specifically with the white pieces, so this match is by no means decided yet. Let's see how this game goes. For this game, the players repeated quite a few of the same moves that they played in game number 4, so let's get through this very quickly. E4, E5, knight to C3, bishop to C5, G3, and here Lasker decided to play A6. The move order is different, but the ultimate position ends up being the same. After bishop to G2, D6, knight G to E2, knight to C6, D3, bishop E6, castles, knight G to E7, knight to D5, and castles. This was the same position that we had after 8 moves in game number 4. Now in that game, Mieses continued as he always did with king to H1, but in this game he decided to first flick in a trade, and after knight captures on E7, this move is a novelty, and so it is as of move 9 that the players are playing a unique game. Now, if Lasker wanted to transpose back into similar lines as in game 4, he could play knight captures on e7, but as we saw, that got him into a whole lot of trouble, and he wisely decided to deviate from that by playing queen captures on e7 instead. Mieses remains consistent as ever. He played king to h1, and after Lasker moved his rook over to d8, f4 was played. Now, by moving this rook over to d8, Lasker shows that he really wants to play the move d5. In this particular position, the move doesn't work because f5 kicks the bishop away and this pawn falls, so this is a complete non-starter. The move recommended by the commentators of the day was to play f5 instead, and it's worth noting that black doesn't really mind this bishop opening up with ef5 bishop f5, because yes, this bishop is very strong, but now black is very motivated to put the queen somewhere on this diagonal, play bishop to h3, and now winning this bishop is quite valuable. So white will have to spend time defending against this, black will have 2 central pawns and should have some sort of equality here. But Lasker is a very consistent player. If he says that he's going to play a move, he's going to play other moves to make that happen, and so here, instead of playing the move f5, he instead played f6, opening up the f7 square for the bishop and keeping this d5 dream on the table. Now, of course, we know nowadays what happens if f6 is played, and Mieses continues that exact same trend. After knight to c3, Lasker put his queen on d7, and f5 came. The bishop retreated back to f7 as planned, and now Mieses throws out the best move, g4. He takes advantage of this pawn on f6 by, after queen to e8 from Lasker, he even threw in g5. So already Lasker is put on the back foot and he's forced to defend. He gets his king off of the g file, puts it on h8, and now queen to g4 comes from Mieses. Here Lasker plays rook to d7 so that after queen to h4, creating a double attack on the f6 pawn, he's able to defend it with queen to d8. But rook to f3, Mieses continues the attack. He's planning to bring this rook to h3 and deliver checkmate on the h-file. Now because Mieses' next threat will take another move to develop, Lasker plays a very optimistic move, in my books, knight to b4. Now whether there exists a world where he actually gets to take on c2 and perhaps even a1 remains up in the air. But after rook to h3, he is more or less forced to play what he played next, bishop back to g8. Now, with this being Lasker's 19th move, we are just about to hit the time control. Mieses now has to make move 20. He has a very promising attack, as we can see by these pawns. The pieces are very aggressively placed, pointing at the king side, but these time crunch stages always create chaos, and here Mieses has to be slightly precise. The commentators here give the best move as g6, and they are very correct. This move is very strong. If you play what looks like a solid move from black, h6, then there are quite a few ways for white to win, but a very interesting one given by the commentators is to play queen to g4, and after the move they give rook to e8. They don't even bother with an attack, they simply move the queen back to d1. a3 is coming next to kick the knight, and white is actually positionally winning here. However, things get more spicy if black takes on c2, which is what they were intending all along, where now queen to g4 comes with much more immediate threats. If black takes on a1, then rook captures on h7, forces bishop to h7, and the queen goes to the h-file, delivering checkmate on the next move. So if black here plays the move h6, then white has a move that was available in the other position, bishop captures on h6, where after g captures h6, rook captures h6, the black king will be hunted down. Mieses did not play the move g6, he instead played bishop to d2, which I think is just a move that keeps the status quo and allows him to make the time control. This doesn't lose any sort of advantage, but now he's able to calculate the complications with a sufficient amount of time. However, because Mieses did not play a committal move, he gives Lasker a free tempo, and Lasker spends that playing in the center with the move that he intended to play all along, d5. Now, Mieses has a handful of moves that allow him to keep something of an objective advantage, but many of them end up being somewhat messy. He does have one that allows him to continue the attack rather cleanly, and that is, once again, g6. Now, the point here is that after h6, the commentators give a few lines that start with things like knight to a4 or again queen to g4 with similar threats as in the previous variation, but also easy is for white to just play knight captures on d5, where after knight captures d5, ed5 simply wins a pawn. This can't be taken as bishop h6 would now come with checkmating threats. Once again, Mieses refused to play the move g6, and he instead decided to play queen to g4. Now, as we've seen, this move is a very useful component of the attack, as the previous variations proved, but it's very important that this only works if this pawn is on g6. It's not, and so Lasker takes advantage of this by playing a defensive move that was not available to him before, f captures on g5. Now we see why d5 was such an important resource for Lasker. Bishop g5 doesn't really lead to anything because now this bishop is free to go back to e7 to block. So instead of that, Mieses decided to simply take on d5. Now, to his credit, this position is still very tricky for Lasker to play. Knight captures on d5 does lead to quite a few trades, which should be good for him. Knight d5, bishop d5, let's play bishop g5 here. Bishop g2 check, king g2. And now black has to be a little bit precise, as his queen is under attack and the white kingside attack is still raging on. So the only move that really keeps him comfortably-ish in this game is putting his queen on a8. b5 check comes next, and the white king is a little bit exposed, so black will have resources to take advantage of this. Now, if Lasker got to that position and he either didn't see queen to a8 or couldn't see any sort of reasonable move to get out of that, it makes sense why he decided to preemptively defend the g5 pawn by playing bishop to e7. In this position, however, Mieses is entitled to play a very snazzy move, which this time he does find, d6. The point here is that after bishop to d6, now bishop captures on g5 works regardless of this bishop being able to block because we have opened up this attack on the knight. So for example, if bishop goes back to e7 to block, then f6. You can't take it because you lose the knight here. And if the bishop goes back to d6 to defend, then f7. The queen is once again attacked, but now the bishop on g8 is hit as well. Black loses a piece and the game. So in this position, black would be forced to move the queen. Let's put it somewhere like c8. And now white is entitled to move the knight into e4. Get this knight into the game. White doesn't really care about c2 as this rook is coming over to the kingside, and white's kingside attack still has plenty of steam. Once again, however, Mieses switched up the move order, and he played knight to e4 first. Now, the difference here is that Lasker is given one more tempo, which he uses to play knight to d5, getting out of danger from the queen's attack. Now, if Mieses here played knight captures on g5, we would be looking at very independent lines with their own value, but here he continued along the same path by playing bishop captures on g5. Now, again, because this knight has moved out of the way, Lasker is able to block this with bishop to e7, and now Mieses justifies why he played knight to e4 first. He did this because he has access to the move knight to c5, winning the exchange. This rook can't move as the b7 pawn is hanging and d6 is no safer for it. Now Lasker definitely saw this, and he had to assume that this was not enough for Mieses to get an advantage, and he's correct. Bishop captures on g5 was played. After knight d7, queen captures on g5, Mieses has won the exchange, but Lasker has the initiative, and he uses it to play knight to f4. Now, unfortunately for Mieses, best is probably giving back the exchange by playing something like rook to f1 and allowing Lasker to take on h3 here. But that wouldn't lead to a very good position. That would be balanced-ish. Mieses, of course, has to play for the win here, so he keeps the exchange and plays rook to g3. Lasker maintains his initiative by playing rook captures on f5, and of course Mieses keeps his queen on the g-file. Now, for what seems to be the first time in this entire game, it is Lasker who has a move here that allows him to maintain a winning position. So as per usual, what I want you to do is to pause the video and see if you can find the move that Lasker has at his disposal to once again swindle Mieses out of what would have been a very nice attacking game. All right, 3, 2, 1. Here, Lasker decided to trade on g2, and with knight captures on g2, he unfortunately lost his winning position. What he needed to find first was this very nice move, h5. It is crucial that black kicks the queen off of the g-file so that white is no longer threatening an immediate checkmating threat, and this queen is free to hunt down the white king. For example, if we bring the queen back to d1, now knight captures on g2 is very strong. Let's say king captures g2 as it was played in the game, queen to d5 with check. If rook to f3, rook to g5 with check. And after king to f1, black will start blowing open the center with e4, and it's the white king that will be ultimately getting hunted down. After Lasker's move of knight captures g2, king captures g2 is played, and now queen to c6 check. Mieses finds the only move that doesn't lose the game for him, king down to g1, and now Lasker has to be very careful. Because he refused to kick the queen away, he has to deal with the fact that this checkmating threat is coming, so he plays the move g6 to defend against this. Now it's Mieses' turn to play a very quick defensive move. He slides this queen back to e2 to defend the c2 pawn, and here Lasker gave a check on b6. Now Lasker, after this move, offered a draw. The present conditions are, this was Lasker's 33rd move, so Mieses has 7 more moves to make, and apparently he only had 5 minutes left on his clock. So seeing that he was in immense time trouble, Mieses decided to accept the draw. Now obviously a draw is not what Mieses wants, but the problem he's facing is that the only move that doesn't lose for him here is queen to e3, and after queen captures on b2, it's a matter of whether or not he can win this position. The commentators want to put the rook on e1, the engine wants to put the rook on f1. Either way, there is no clear path forward for white, and he would have to make another 6 moves here with 5 minutes on his clock, and he could very well lose this position. So I think it's a very mature and professional decision to accept the draw, even if this doesn't help his match situation at all. So once more, the status quo is maintained. After 6 games, Lasker continues to lead 3-0, and there is still more chess to be played. So the match will continue in the next video. I look forward to seeing you there. Until then.